Hi, everyone, and welcome to Legal Management Talk, the official podcast of the Association of Legal Administrators. We're covering all angles of legal management. I'm your host, Justin Eskenazi. So our guest today is Hunter Steele. He is the CEO of practice management software company Smokeball. And as we record this, it's mid-afternoon Chicago time, but he is coming to us from Australia, where it is morning time there. So I appreciate you waking up early to join us.
No problem, Justin. Thanks for having me. It is nice and bright 7 o'clock in the morning here, but it's good to be online.
Of course. Today we're going to talk about a topic that I know that you're passionate about, as are many in the legal space, and that is, of course, AI. So we're no stranger to covering AI here at this podcast, but I think it's important to kind of periodically update, where things are at with AI in the legal world, where things are headed, since everything changes so fast nowadays. So I appreciate you being here and looking forward to getting your insights.
It's been an interesting year, an exciting year, this last 12 months, and an interesting topic. And we've learned a lot, to be honest. I would say 15 months ago, we didn't know that much. And now through, lots of feedback and lots of industry change and lots of research, there's lots of good things to talk about.
Yeah. So we'll get into the nitty gritty of everything in just a sec. But first, I want to talk about something that I know has been in the news a lot over the last year or two, especially since tools like ChatGPT came around. And that is the issue of hallucinations and these kinds of, fake things that AI will come up with to answer a prompt that often get lawyers in hot water with judges when they're presenting, case names that don't exist and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about what we're seeing now, a couple of years into this kind of situation, and how common this really is in the legal world?
Yeah, it's a good question. And funnily enough, it is the thing that people think about or talk about the most, even though it's probably a very small minority in terms of how often it happens compared with how much AI is being used already in the legal profession. But I think the reason is that it is so bad and so dramatic when it does happen because of the outcomes, when you're in front of the court or in front of the judge or whatever it may be. Look, I think in terms of how often does it happen, it definitely does happen. We've said that since day one, and all of our experiments and prototypes and our current products to do with AI, occasionally you will see it happen. And I do talk about a little bit. It's like a human. Occasionally someone is put on the spot and they ask a question and they just want to get an answer out. They do their best and they think they're right and they're not trying to lie, but they do their best to give the answer that the person wants to hear rather than the absolute true facts. Now, I think when you're using an application that is kind of non-legal specific, might be ChatGPT. It's not really trained not to do that. It's like, hey, just do your best and see how you go. And it is getting a lot better. And there is a lot of training going on. But I think in a legal specific world, utilizing AI, more and more companies are leaning into that, saying, hey, let's make sure that we put a lot of wrappers around this to try and minimize the fact that can or may happen. And I think that's getting better and better. So my view is that even if we're hearing that it happens more and more, it's probably happening less within these applications. But there's just more people using AI. So the balance there looks like it's going the wrong way. But I think it's a big problem that people are looking into and looking to solve. And we'll go into it more later, but I think leaning into applications that specialize in AI for law firms and their outcomes, you're probably going to get a better result than using the generic tools, which are very powerful in everyday life and maybe not so much trained in the practice of using AI in law.
Sure. And I would imagine that the key, as it is right now, is to just be very, very careful about the product that you're putting out and to review anything the AI says, because there's a chance any part of it could be, if not wholly inaccurate, then at least only partially accurate, and you need everything to be completely accurate. So
that's exactly right. But that's not changed. That's kind of what we've been saying. That's not changed in the last 100 years, in fact, and that a lot of our clients have junior attorneys and paralegals who are doing work on their behalf. And I always ask them, would you ever take what they've given and put it in front of the judge without you reading it? And they're like, never. And I'm like, well, it's exactly the same here. It's no different. You're using technology to do that and get to that first draft. We always say first draft or whatever it may be for you to be able to review rather than and put it straight out the door. And I think if we think about it in that way as a junior attorney who's come straight out of college, absolutely nailed it and, was top of their class and doing a great job, but they've come in and they have no practical knowledge and they're really trying to impress you and they're going to give you a first draft. What are you going to do with that? That is unfortunately how we need to treat AI. And I think it always will be. I don't think that's going to change. Doesn't matter how long time goes on. And it's got to be that first fundamental step people understand as they take a journey with AI.
Exactly. So now let's kind of talk about the AI tools that are there in the legal space. I know that there's a bunch of different tools that serve a bunch of different purposes, but as it stands right now, what do you see as kind of the best uses for AI, the most commonly used, what are the most commonly used ways that firms are using AI today?
Yeah, it's my favorite topic because it's evolved so much every month. I used to kind of keep a running sheet of what's happening in the world. What have we learned? What are some of our competitors doing? What are some legal tech startups in AI doing? Not competitive, but in different ways. And I kind of keep changing, but it's been grouped into 4 categories probably for the last 6 to 12 months now. It seems to be settling into that. So those 4 categories from a very high level, the first one is really just those kind of day-to-day productivity type use cases or tools. And this is kind of like quick drafts of any email or correspondence or quick summary or quick clause, whatever it may be. Those tools, they seem to be coming a little bit table stakes at the kind of practice management, document management, case management level, which makes a lot of sense. So it's just adding a bit of a productivity uplift to some of those things that you're doing, those small things you're doing every day. So instead of you doing, 100 things that take you 5 minutes each, you do 100 things that might take you 1 minute each. And that's a great productivity uplift. So I feel like that's the kind of base level that is really starting to become very powerful, but also quite standard at that practice management level. Different ways people are implementing it, but very powerful nonetheless. The second is getting into the kind of practice area specific tasks. So I kind of there's a lot of startups in these places. There's some really good personal injury tools out there that are really focusing down on, let's say, medical record summaries or deposition summaries, things like that. That's quite a specific tool that has been trained to do a good job of that task. I almost call those kind of AI paralegals in a way. They're really solving tasks that they're not truly legal specific, that require an attorney to do the work necessarily. Obviously, they have to review it, but it's something that takes a lot of time. You need to understand the domain of personal injury, for example. You need to be able to take a whole lot of information and summarize and bring the important things down. And a lot of those, they're very valuable. Personal injury is one. We've seen some great tools in family law and in other small law practice areas that I think are really adding a whole lot of value. Those aren't saving minutes in the day. They're saving hours in the day, and they're very specific to those practice areas, kind of delivered by people, generally a startup who really understand that practice area deeply, whether it be because they're personally been involved, generally working in a PI firm or a family law firm or a bankruptcy firm, or they're working with a firm that actually has those pain points to be able to solve them. The third one, and is the one that's kind of, I think, exploded a little bit, really, I kind of categorize as contract review. There are lots and lots and lots of AI companies starting up out there. They're really focusing on contract review. I feel like from our space point of view, it's a little bit of take up in the small law. We kind of work with firms in the kind of 1 to 50 user space, but it's not actually running rife because in the small firm practice areas of personal injury and family law and estate planning and wealth and criminal law, there's not a huge amount of contract review, to be honest. It's not that business to business law as much as it kind of gets more into that in those bigger firms. But those tools, there's great products out there. We hear about ones like Vocal and spoken about, and some really great tools. There's lots of other ones out there that really focusing on contract review, taking big contracts, doing a review, helping draft clauses, helping compare. Very, very, very powerful in those and embedding them often right down into the tools using every day, like Microsoft Word, for example. And then the last one is legal research. We can't forget that's probably also a big bucket. And that space we generally see the legal publishers. They're the ones who's sitting on the absolute goldmine of information, case law legislation, legal guidance, and plugging an AI flavor on top of that or alongside that is also extremely powerful. So if I kind of look at those four, you normally find things fall into one of those four buckets, that those kind of practice management tasks getting more and more done in those little bits, those practice area specific tools in those kind of verticals, I would say, the legal research side and that contract review side. So lots happening across those four. Not everything is important to everyone or useful, but there's a lot in there that is really adding value to law firms across the world.
Yeah. I think that's really cool that they're coming up with now practice area specific tools, because I know that there's a lot that goes into something like, like personal injury or even something like IP law, which is a very specific, skill set. Are we going to continue to see, even for larger swaths like litigation, are we going to continue to see tools come out that will serve those specific communities?
I think so. I think actually it's going to be, I think the biggest kind of flourish has been in that contract review side. There's a lot of competition and there's a lot of good products in there now, and it's starting to kind of ease off a little bit. And I think where I'm seeing more and more startups, legal tech startups come is really in that practice area specific task, because they're solving real problems that are quite large and quite real, but it takes training and knowledge and understanding and practice and making it better. So they've taken a little bit longer out of the gate. A good example I kind of say is a legal chronology. We get in our kind of general Archie tool, we get a lot of people saying, hey, take these 30 documents and create a chronology for me. That's a pretty big task. I think that's like taking your paralegal straight out of first day and say, can you do that? They don't really understand. They don't know what they're looking for. They maybe not they're not going to do a great job of that. And so I think that people are asking these kind of more generic tools to do things that they're just not built for, and they'll have a go at them, but it's not going to be a great result. I think that building a tool that sole job is to build a beautiful chronology out of a mountain of information and then represent that on the screen in a way that is very useful, where you can search and browse and cut and dice those dates is definitely very powerful. And I've seen a few of those pop up in the last 6 months as well.
Yeah, I'm sure that'd be incredibly useful. As we're now talking about things coming down the pipeline, let's talk about what else is coming. I know that outside of the legal specific tools, there's also, practice management tools and things more on the HR and administrative side of things. So what kind of tools on that end are popping up to make that side of things easier?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot here in terms of, I think a lot of people think of us, of a law firm as their purpose. All they do is really kind of produce work for the law or work on their matters, but they're still running a business. So they're still doing marketing, and they're still hiring, and they're still doing business reviews, and they're doing all of the things that all of us do as a business or a small business to be able to keep running and be successful. And I think that in some of those areas where we're seeing a lot, we definitely know, I think marketing is a place where, AI has definitely taken hold, and it was probably one of the first areas to add a huge amount of value and change the landscape. And I think that's no different for small law firms as well. Small law firms, generally biggest source of work is word of mouth, but that is starting to change over time. And I think that actually a lot of the firms we see these days are engaging with a lot more marketing than they used to, whether that be social or whether that be referral or whatever it may be. And generally the power of AI in those areas is absolutely huge. So marketing, we definitely see more and more of our firms starting to use it in those areas outside of just producing the legal work than what we had before. So definitely marketing. I think in terms of HR and managing people and the business, maybe a little bit starting to hear it. I don't hear about it all the time. Generally, funnily enough, small law don't love talking about running the people in their business, and we try and help them with that. This is a small business, not just a law firm, and it is I think an area of the next 12 months we'll start to see some adoption, but it's pretty early days in that area.
Gotcha. Hi there. This episode is brought to you by NetDocuments, the #1 trusted cloud-native and intelligent document management platform used by legal professionals worldwide. NetDocuments empowers law firms, corporate legal departments, and public sector organizations to organize, secure, and collaborate on documents effortlessly, wherever work happens. With built-in knowledge management, powerful automation, and AI tools, NetDocuments turns your document repository into a hub of insight and productivity. Learn more at netdocuments.com and find out how smarter work starts here. And I mean, to be a broken record from earlier on, but at least on the marketing side of things, I know um, that AI certainly can be used to help as you're coming up with, language and ideas and everything. But just like when you're looking at cases and the work that you're presenting to a judge, you got to check out the stuff that AI generates on the marketing side too, because it's, you got to make sure it's getting the facts straight, obviously, but the tone and stuff like that also I found sometimes can be lacking. So that it still requires that human element of making sure that you're getting the message that you want across, even though AI is helping with some of that.
Yeah, I think that it doesn't matter if it's law or not. Anyone talking about AI, there's two pretty key words that I think we need to keep talking about and people understand. One is it's the kind of human in the loop. There's very few people talk about agentic flows. We can get onto that later, but I think in terms of human in the loop, I don't think that's going to change. In that, I've heard some people set up some great applications that says, hey, set this up that every week I want you to write a new blog article or social media post for me and just write it and on these topics and post it. And I'm like, wow, that's really gutsy, to be honest. You don't really know what's going to go out there. And would you do that without a human looking at it? And I think that's a little bit crazy. I think human in the loop, what we're doing is instead of you taking an hour to write something and having a mental block, here's something that you can refine in 5 minutes, but you still need the 5 minutes. And obviously that other is first draft. Let's call everything first draft. It's first draft. Now it may be very close to a final draft. That would be great. Maybe it's a 1 minute read, or maybe it gets it completely wrong and you ask it to start again. But I think that first draft is a very important word. So let's keep the human in the loop and let's keep that mentality of first draft. It is going to be a massive productivity uplift either way, but it's not the final product for your eyes not to see.
Of course. And speaking of, some apprehensions as we approach in the legal industry, I think there's been a lot of kind of thought among especially traditionalists of, well, if our business model is based on the billable hour and how much work we're doing is how much we bill, if AI is going to help us with efficiency and take less time to do tasks, then doesn't that mean that we're billing fewer hours and thus making less money? How on the tech side of things, what's your response to that question?
It is a really good question, to be honest, and I don't think everything's been thought through here, and there is no right or wrong answer. But the two things that I think pop out of it, the first is that we know through working with our clients, thousands of clients across the world who are time billing, that generally, to be honest, in small law, they're actually only billing about 3.2 hours a day on average, and we know they're working more like 8 or 10 hours a day. And the problem with that is they're not actually billing for the kind of administrative tasks or all of the thousands of little things they're doing to kind of communicate with their clients and get their work done. They're not billing for those things anyway. They're billing for the substantive law stuff, which I don't think is actually going to change. So I think that, to me, to be honest, I don't think it's going to change a lot from that area, all of that much. The other side of it is where some of these tools are coming up that are a little bit more substantive law and doing things in 5 minutes that were taking 3 hours, like creating chronologies and organizing them and all of those kind of things in, for example, in family law. And it's an interesting one. It's like, well, if I was going to bill for 3 hours, what do I do now? I think a lot of people are thinking about this in two ways. One is I'm so busy and I could take on more work, but I just don't have time. It's going to actually allow me to take on more and bill clients for the substantive stuff that I do bill them for. And so I'm not actually going to be making less money. I'm going to be help clients. So I definitely hear that a lot. Most people aren't sitting there saving that time and then being bored. They're actually getting that time back and being able to spend it wisely to be able to either generate more revenue through more clients or focus on sales and marketing or some other things in the firm they've wanted to do, or maybe just have some time back to spend with their families or spend doing something else. So I think that is one part of it. The other is, I guess, that fair billing kind of policy. And I think a lot, if I just again use family law as an example, we're seeing a lot of firms definitely over the last 3 years, more and more shift to more of a fixed fee type model. And I think that then those efficiency gains are very good for them because the more work they can do in less time on that fixed fee model, the more they're making. And so I think that there will be a real challenge to that billable hour over the next 10 years as these firms learn to kind of move into value-based billing rather than that kind of 6-minute increments. I still think it's very important that people in law firms do actually record their time. We have tools to help them do that automatically because actually knowing where you're spending the time and where the work product is being done, even in a fixed fee matter, it kind of tells you whether you're profitable or making money or it's working well as a business model in these areas rather than just guessing, saying, maybe I put a price on this and hopefully some matters I make money and some matters I lose money, but at the end of the day, I'm going okay. So I do think it's important to kind of know where you're spending the time. That doesn't mean you have to bill it in that way. And that kind of fair billing and fixed fee billing is definitely going to see a shift over the next 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, no, the billable hour conversation is a huge one that is going on, and I know we've covered it here before, and it's always interested me how it comes in. It always comes back to whatever topic you're talking about. It can always somehow relate back to the billable hour and the impact that has on how a firm operates, and certainly AI is one of those big factors.
Yeah, and I will say, again, we focus on small law and the primary practice areas that these small law firms, 1 to 50 people are working on. We kind of call it people law or that where most of the time your client is a person, not an organization. And in those cases, there's a big mix of fixed fee work that's already out there and has been for a long time and moving towards that way even more of contingency work, obviously from the personal injury side right through to the time billers. I think there's this kind of perception that every lawyer time bills, and it's not true. We say about probably 40% of our clients are billing by the hour, 60% across the world in different practice areas. And I just think that maybe that 40 might get a little bit smaller and they bill in different ways. But I think in the larger law space, I think it's probably 95% are still billing by the hour. And it is challenging their work model a little bit more than the small law space. It is definitely challenging in the small law, but it's, I think, less of an impact than what it is in some of those larger firms.
Right. So I know that I'm sure this number is also dwindling by the day, but I know there are certainly a lot of lawyers, firm administrators who are certainly still skeptical about what AI can bring to their firm, and are, trying to keep it at arm's length still for the time being. What would your advice be to them as we've kind of gotten into this time of AI now, and we've kind of felt out how it's starting to work? What's your advice to them on whether they should start integrating it and how to go about it?
Yes, I always start, this might seem silly, but I always start on the personal side. I think people's journey with AI actually starts with individuals and then through to businesses and organizations, teams in their businesses and organizations. And that individual is make sure that you understand the value that this technology is providing by signing up to a chat GPT or whatever account it might be. There's so many of them out there, and use it in your personal life. And even if it's once a week or once a month, whether it be to, help you for a party invitation or write a letter to your boss asking for a pay rise, anything like that, use it in your life. I mean, personally, I think I use AI probably 10 times a day in certain things and it's not always business related. And it's really good because you start to see, okay, this is powerful and it's in a very low risk area, because if you don't like it, you don't have to do anything about it. And almost start using it. I think even today, I probably start using it as a bit of a replacement search engine and feel like I'm getting, better results. So I think that start using it in your everyday life, because you'll start to feel and get comfortable with the technology itself. When it comes to the business or the firms, I think that it's probably leaning into, there's probably some AI functionality that is already available in the tools from the vendors you already use today. It's a really good place to start. You already have a relationship and a trust relationship with those vendors, and talk to them about like, what tools do you have and how could we implement it, or how could we pilot it with a small group to see if this is going to work for us, to see if we trust it, to see if there's any value that it's going to bring, rather than going to market and starting a free trial with 10 things that you don't trust or don't understand. And they're obviously more in a selling mode of trying to sell something to you. So I think generally, you're probably going to find there's going to be some AI tools or functionality or value in those tools you're using today, and to kind of start small in that way. Once you've done that with a pilot group and you start purposely rolling it out within your firm, then it's kind of your year and start seeing some of these other tools, practice area specific, that really may add value to your firm, and you can lean into it that way. So I guess, in theory or summary, it's more of a journey. Start within your personal life, start with it, with the tools you're already at. Start with a pilot group within your firm. It doesn't have to be everyone, and work out and meet regularly to see what value it's adding, or if it's bringing some risk that you're not comfortable with, and then just work on it that way. It doesn't matter if it takes a year or 2 years. You don't have to jump in head first today with every tool available. It's really a journey that can take you there, and that's a great way to do it.
Of course, there's your action items, everybody. It's start small and then just keep trying it out.
We have definitely heard, I've heard many times, we've heard more and more now of firms kind of starting a little bit of an AI committee and meeting once a week just for half an hour to say, where do we start? What are we doing? And sometimes that's actually not even with a tool, but an AI policy within the firm to say, hey, from our people point of view, if we're going to allow the use of AI, then we want to, control what tools are used and how they're used. So let's put a policy together. It might be just a 2 or 3 pager that we can share with our staff to say, hey, this is our take on AI. We're not going to stop. We don't want to stop you using it. We see there's value and you're probably going to use it anyway, especially the younger generation, but let's kind of do it on our terms. So have a team together that is starting with, policy, and then working through what tools you want to use and prototype and experiment, come back and talk about them before you kind of jump head first and throw them to your team members and hope for the best.
Yeah. And real quick before we go, since you brought up AI policies, and I know that continues to be a big question among firm leaders of what should an AI policy look like, and I'm sure that it's obviously always changing, always meant to change, and you have to evolve. But what are you seeing with how firms are crafting AI policies now? What are a couple of the best practices when it comes to those?
Yeah, I think I touched on a few before. I mean, they're starting to become, I wouldn't say a standard, but they're starting to be a form that everyone is starting to be comfortable with. We have those available. We share them with our clients and say, here's an example. Obviously, like anything, make it your own and adapt it. But here's some of the topics that you should cover, and here's some examples. I think the main things realistically still come down to probably 3 things. One is generally involved around ethics and security of the data. So, and that is that, we have an obligation to keep our clients' data confidential, and especially making sure that that's the case. And we need to make sure that that's front and center to everything we do as a law firm. And so because of that, there's 2 things. One is you need to only use the tools that have been approved by the firm, because we've done our due diligence that these are tools that are keeping our client data sensitive. And secondly is to ensure that you are not sharing confidential information outside of the realm that those tools or the firm is responsible for. So number 1 is definitely that sensitive information and security. Number 2 kind of rolls into that is the tools that we do approve. So we want to approve you to use this. We want to encourage you to be more productive, but here's the tools that we approve. If there's a tool that you want to use outside of this, please bring it to us and we can do our due diligence and make a decision as to whether that's the case, rather than just let some of these tools run wild and ad hoc in the office. I don't think, there's a whole product-led space of SaaS technology. I don't think AI should be one of those within a small law firm. I think it is too dangerous, to be honest, and they need to really be able to control what tools are being used by their teams and when they're being used. So I think the ethical side of those 2, and then finally, obviously, is checking your work. AI is a tool that can make mistakes. We've all seen it. We've all read about it. We've probably all had experiences ourselves. This is not to be a final product. It is to get you to a first draft, help you not start with that blank piece of paper, but you are still 100% responsible for the work that you do or that your people do who are reporting to you within a law firm that goes out the door, and you will be held accountable ethically and legally for that work. So I think they're the 3 topics people are talking about the most. Obviously, the sensitivity of the information, the tools that are being used, and obviously that responsibility for the work product that goes out the door. 3 top liners that must be in every policy agreement within the firm.
Definitely. Well, I really appreciate you being here. Thanks for giving us this update on where AI is at, and look forward to talking more in the future.
I appreciate you having me. As I said, if I could leave everyone with something, it's just start using AI in your personal life, get used to it, create a committee within your firm, start talking about it. Don't bury your head and hope that it's not here because it will be. And maybe start with a policy so at least you're all on the same page. Taking some steps like that, I think are pretty important. And I think that it's a journey, but it's one well worth jumping on.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you to our viewers and subscribers for tuning in. Please be sure to like the video, comment on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can also find us wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, you can learn more about ALA at alanet.org. Until next time.